Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Last week, I had the opportunity to speak to the Israeli ambassador to CARICOM and other states such as Barbados, Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago, non-resident, of course, to those states. And we spoke about the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine, though in that interview he stressed it's not against Palestine, it's against the group Hamas. Now this morning we are speaking on a different side of things. We're speaking about the Gaza Strip in particular, which of course Palestinians occupy. This morning as we have the conversation, the latest information that I have at hand is that the death toll, the number of Palestinians killed in this conflict, is nearing 4,000, if it has not already crossed 4,000. The number of Israelis killed is 1,400 plus as we speak this morning. But to expand on this conversation and to hear from all in terms of what is taking place, I'm now joined by the president of the Islamic Dawah Movement of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Mirza Ali-Mohammed, and he's with us via Zoom. Hello, sir. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining me, sir. Let me ask first, this war is being described as a conflict between from so many areas across the world, whether it be Israel versus Gaza, Israel versus Palestine, Israel versus Hamas. There's so many areas of which are being raised and so many points of which are being raised, but your thoughts and opinion on this conflict and exactly who are the sides involved?
So war is never something that is good. In war, people die, families are separated, infrastructure is damaged, there's total devastation. And in many cases, you have one side being beaten up as against the other. This has been espoused by the Israeli narrative. It's a war between Israel and Hamas. Hamas has been the government of Gaza, and maybe we could get into some geography because I'm not sure if people understand the geography of the place. Hamas has been the government of Gaza. Yes, they have been declared as a terrorist organization. But one of the points I really want to make, Ketan, is I'm of the view, and we are of the view, that this war is not about between Israel and Hamas. This is about Israel and Palestine, because the atrocities committed to the Palestinian people, and I'm not saying this, UN says it, Human Rights Watch says it, Amnesty International says it, the atrocities being committed to the Palestinian people didn't start on October 7th. The atrocities against the Palestinian people started 75 years ago with something called the Nakba, where the Palestinians were violently uprooted from their lands and made refugees literally overnight. In this case, there was an incursion of Hamas, and they went into Israeli territory. But there's some people, but the context is important. The context is important, and it's not really a war against Hamas, but it is in fact genocide and annihilation of a people which started 75 years ago. It's unfortunate that babies and women are being killed, because as far as international law is concerned, international humanitarian law, Israel is breaking all of them. And the world sits by and will look at genocide taking place.
Mm-hmm. His Excellency Bardov, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, he directly says that Israel recognizes the Palestinian Authority and relinquished territory to the Palestinians. Your comments suggest otherwise.
So the two areas where Palestinians are in Israel, one is a tiny little strip called the Gaza Strip, 25 miles long, 7 miles wide, and the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority was the government of the Palestinians prior to 2006. Elections were held. The Palestinian Authority remained the government in the West Bank, but in the Gaza Strip, the people voted for Hamas. Whether it's right or wrong, I really don't know. I don't live there. But we do know they have been the government. Hamas has been declared a terrorist organization by Israel and by several international agencies by virtue of what they have done. And as a result of that, 2006, Gaza has been barricaded literally with high fences on all sides going into Israel and including the sea. So it's a literal open air prison. I'm not saying that Jimmy Carter, the former president of the United States, say that. Several international experts are saying that it is a literal war prison. So because Hamas became the government literally of Gaza, Israel decided we will not deal with terrorists. In their mind is a terrorist. And as a result, they cut off a number of things. People became more ill-treated. And this is the Israeli ambassador, respect to him. And I saw the comments against the CARICOM statement, which I think was good. The CARICOM statement was in fact good. So regardless of what any ambassador says, regardless of what any spokesperson says, the facts are there. And I'm saying, Ketan, it's not me. This is in fact being said by the Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty International, by so many experts all over the world, that it is in fact an open air prison. And the Palestinians, we have to be clear, the history did not start on October 7th. History started 75 years ago with this catastrophe and the continued settlements and the continued atrocities being committed. UNESCO, in fact, commented, UN, I can tell you resolution after resolution after resolution after resolution that Israel blatantly refused. Blatantly refused. So really is about, Israel is making this about Hamas. And Islam does not condone the killing of civilians. Let me establish that as well. Islam does not condone the killing of civilians. And whatever Hamas did, they will deal with that. But this is really a fight about Palestine and not necessarily only Hamas.
Mm-hmm. Now, Hamas became the government of the Gaza or Palestine. And again, I'm glad that you mentioned at the beginning the geographics involved in this as well. But now, following the events from October 7th, is there support or condemnation for Hamas?
So, Ketan, for the last 12 days, there has been support for the Palestinian people in many, many, many countries of the world. Countries that are not even Muslim. In Scotland, in Chicago, in Brussels, in Australia, Pakistan. We could send for the next 10 minutes, just list country after country after country that has had support for the Palestinian people, not for Hamas, but the Palestinian people. The only people who are in support of Israel are really the Western governments. Western governments, not the world. The world has seen it for all this time, and therefore we are talking, all of the people internationally and on the news media, we are talking October 7th to now what has happened. And it's important to talk that because that's what started this recent conflict and this recent incursion and this recent attempt at genocide. But the issue really goes beyond that. It goes wider than that. It goes back a very long time. So this is not about Hamas. If you ask any average Muslim if they support the killing of civilians, they will tell you the Quran says no. Allah says no, we cannot support the killing of civilians and women and children, which is what is happening with carpet bombing and collective punishment from Israel. United Nations telling Israel, you are going against international law by carpet bombing a place, by in fact killing women and children. All of the 4,000 you just mentioned, close to 5,000 people died. 1/3 of them, more than 1/3, are in fact children. This is against international law. You cannot collectively punish a people because of the crimes of one particular group. And they're saying that Hamas is using people as human shields. Well, there have been a lot of lies, which I hope we could get into, that's been happening. But definitely the support is not necessarily for Hamas. The support by Jews as well in the United States. 2 days ago, Ketan, Jews went into the Capitol building of the United States. These are Jews. And they in fact had, Jersey is not in my name. They condemned Israel for the atrocities. They say, this is not Jewry, this is not Judaism, this is something else, it's Zionism. And they were prepared to get arrested in the Capitol building in support of the Palestinian people. So the support around the world has been for Palestinians and their struggle for statehood and not necessarily for Hamas.
You mentioned collective punishment. That being the case, and the current head of Israel, the Israeli government, Benjamin Netanyahu, earlier this year says he does not believe in collective punishment. But are you of the opinion, based off of what you've said thus far this morning, that the people of Palestine, Palestinians, are actually being held responsible for the actions of the group Hamas?
So Palestinians have been living there for a long time. There have been other groups beside Hamas. There's Islamic Jihad, Al-Qassam brigades, and so on. But what has happened historically, Ketan, is that if you cage up an animal long enough, you cage up a dog, you give the dog no food, you beat the dog, you ill-treat the dog, and then the dog snaps at you and barks at you, and we take an image and we show the world and say, look how savage these creatures are. And this is what has happened to these people. So what you see happening for the last 50 years is really a reaction to what has met out to the people. So the head of state could say that they don't believe in collective punishment because he has to say that this is in fact international law. You cannot say don't believe in it because it is international law, collective punishment. So they are supposed to go after Hamas if it is they feel that strong. But I'm saying it really is not about Hamas. It is what they want us to believe.
Yes.
And you know, Israel has been doing a spin.
Let me interrupt you there. You said it is what they want us to believe. That, with the statement that you made earlier about there are a lot of false narratives that are now being spewed. Could you kindly elaborate on what you're referring to?
Yeah. Ketan, my background is in mass communication, right? I studied mass communication at a tertiary level. And one of the things my professor said at university is news is a manufactured entity. Honestly, I didn't understand it when I was young then. As I grew later, I realized that we could understand why taking a cat off a tree makes news and a fire with 500 people dead somewhere doesn't make any news, because news is a manufactured entity. And Israel has been hiring, well, the information we have is that they've been hiring some people to do some narratives. Let me just give you a couple of quick ones. Shireen Abu Akleh, a journalist just like you, was shot in 2022. She was shot by an Israeli sniper. Israel says, no, it's not us. It is in fact Hamas. It is in fact Crossfire that in fact shot the woman. Then the narrative changed when the autopsy was done and it showed she was shot in the face by an Israeli bullet. And the narrative changed. We had a situation just recently within the last 12 days when the spokesperson for the head of state said, Israeli head of state says, that they found 40 babies that were decapitated, beheaded. The President of the United States of America, he went on air, it is in fact on record, where he says, I saw with my own eyes images of babies decapitated. These are not, and I forget the word that he used describing the people of Palestine and describing Hamas. He said, I saw it with my own eyes. The White House scrambled within hours to go to press to say, oops, we're sorry, it really wasn't true. He did not see the images. He went with what the spokesperson for Benjamin Netanyahu said, and he went with what the media was in fact saying, but in fact is not true. The latest one is the bombing of the hospital. The bombing of the hospital, everybody is saying Israel bombed the hospital. 500 people dead in one swoop. But they're saying, no, it's not us, it's Hamas or Islamic Jihad, it's a misguided rocket. Ketan, thank God for technology. Thank God for technology. The experts have pieced together, have examined and dissected the videos minute by minute, second by second, to see which rocket was in the air, at what point in time it fell on the hospital. And the evidence is in fact quite clear. And you can Google it on your own if you want, anybody else who's looking at the show, that it is in fact an Israeli rocket that bombed the hospital. So the narrative has been there. The narrative is going on. So Israel wants to make themselves look as a victim. And if you're the victim, of course, you get the sympathy of the world, and you in fact can justify getting more weapons and so on to you. So this is not about Hamas. This is about Palestinian people being demoralized, being demonized. And if I demonize a people often enough and I'm ready to kill them, the whole world will say, yes, you are justified. So Hamas is not the issue, and we are not supporting Hamas here. Islam does not support the killing of civilians. It is enshrined in our law. We do not do that.
Let me just quote for you from a poem entitled Save Gaza. It was actually authored by Dr. Amina Ibrahim Ali. And she says, mother turned away and sobbed as they took a child away to bury him in the land where their families were betrayed. That last line as part of that stanza, where their families were betrayed, how much of that are we now seeing, especially given the pro-Palestine and pro-Palestinian protests and gatherings taking place across the world? There are pro-Israel protests and gatherings as well taking place, but that line, in the land where their families were betrayed.
So I'm not sure what Dr. Amina would have meant. I know her well and the family, but we were betrayed because I think she meant that Before 1948, there was no country called Israel. Jews were there, welcomed by the Muslims, or welcomed by the Palestinians, I should say, because Palestine has Muslims, has Christians, and had some Jews, sprinkling of Jews. So before 1948, there was no country called Israel. It was a making of European powers, especially British, when they won Palestine in World War I from the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was, in fact, a Muslim empire. And they won it, and they started to divide up and chop up lands and give people. So Jews started to migrate because they said, we'll give a homeland to the Jews based on something that took place in 1917. And Jews started to move in one by one by one. They started to move in droves in 1946, 1947. In 1948, Israel was declared as a country and sent 700,000 people as refugees overnight in their own land. The land was owned by Palestinians for thousands of years, not even hundreds, but thousands of years. The Israelis were not in the land before 1948. There were sprinklings of them. And all of a sudden, it's like Ketan, I gave you a room in my house to stay, and I'm very nice. And all of a sudden, you take over my house and you put me in a small little cubby hole in a coop in the backyard. And this is why the betrayal took place. We helped you, we supported you, we gave you land, we gave you place, we were good. And then you turned around and you betrayed us and you kicked us. And you know what's interesting? A historical fact. Muslims were in control of Spain for 800 years. 800 years. Not 80, 800. Jews were living there. Christians were living there. There was a period of religious tolerance. One author says it was the best period of religious tolerance in the entire world. When Ferdinand and Isabella came in the 1490s and fight happened and they wanted to chase out the Muslims and the Jews, and the Inquisition took place, the Jews had a choice. You stay and you get killed, or you migrate and move from our land in Spain. The Jews literally, consciously said, we will move into the lands controlled by the Ottoman Empire, the Muslim rulers, because we lived under their rule for 800 years and we were treated with justice. And Muslim lands encouraged and they looked after people who were Jewish people. They give them place, and therefore the Jewish people were given a place and then kicked the people who give them the place. And this is why she probably meant they were betrayed.
Let me ask you, again, all that has been suggested this morning by yourself. Are you of the opinion that the world is denying what has happened in the past?
So, I'm not saying that. United Nations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch are saying that. Ketan, I wrote an article that appeared in, a letter to the editor that came out last week sometime. At the same time, Dr.
Yes, the United Nations has no teeth.
And in that, I just extracted maybe about 10 or 12 UN resolutions that Israel blatantly refused. This is the United Nations. And if somebody just Google resolutions Israel denied or resolutions against Israel, you will find maybe 100, 150 for the last 50 years. And Israel has refused them. So I'm not saying that the world has turned a blind eye. United Nations is saying that, and all of the international agencies. There's a human rights group in Israel called Beit Salem. This is human rights in Israel, run by Israelis, run by Jews, and anybody can Google it. They are saying that the Palestinians are in fact being ill-treated, the Palestinians are being dehumanized, and they are in Israel. Nelson Mandela, who is the epitome of standing up for justice, Nelson Mandela says that what the Palestinian people are going through, in fact, is probably worse than what we are going through or what we went through in South Africa. He didn't call them apartheid, but he referred to Israel as if it's an apartheid state where it is good for one, meaning you can be an Israeli coming from anywhere in the world. You'll get a passport, you'll get a citizenship, but Palestinians born there cannot even be citizens of their own country. The land is confiscated. And I'm not saying this, I'm challenging anyone. I'm challenging Ketan, I'm challenging anybody listening to go on and check UN resolutions and see history and what has happened. Land confiscated. People, in fact, put out of their houses. Settlements have been going on and on and on in the West Bank against international United Nations law. And yet the world has not done anything in the way that it should. So I'm saying yes to you, a blind eye has been turned, unfortunately, the Palestinians are suffering and will continue to suffer if it is Israel gets the kind of support that it's getting from the Western governments.
So why do you suppose that the world, inclusive of the United Nations, has turned its back to Palestinians, given this crisis and given all that has been mentioned this morning, even the condemnations of the past by the United Nations?
So the UN is like, as I mentioned in my article, it's a toothless bulldog. I am of the view. This is my view, and I take responsibility for that. Because not only Israel, they have had resolutions for other places, and they have not done it. But no sanctions. The United Nations has sanctions on places like Mali, places like Central African Republic, and several other places they put sanctions on. But they have not put sanctions on Israel. So, or Israel will get a slap on the wrist, for example, sometimes. So they have not done it. Why they have turned a blind eye? I think as well, the narrative has been very well done from the Israeli side that they are the victims, that they have a God-given right to this land. And therefore, the people who are the ones perpetrating all of the crimes for the last 75 years is not us. It is, in fact, the Palestinian people. And the narrative has happened. The narrative continues to happen. And as a result, people who listen to this narrative, and if we listen to nothing else and we hear this narrative, we will, in fact, believe it. But the facts are there. The history is, in fact, there. But definitely, I feel the world leaders need to wake up, smell the coffee. And I'm even being critical here this morning of even our own Muslim leaders of the world. And they act with almost some impotence. But of course, international politics and so on prevent people from saying and doing things that they really want to. But the facts are there, the historical trends are there in terms of people doing nothing. Should they do? The answer is yes. The Palestinian people are people like anybody else. The two-state solution has been proposed a long time ago. This is in fact the way to go, and the leaders must be pressured into making decisions for peace in Palestine. Nelson Mandela says, if there is no peace in Palestine, there'll be no peace in the world. And therefore, we have to, as best as we possibly can, to stop war, to stop atrocity. It doesn't serve anybody's interest, except a few who want to sell weapons and so on. And we really want to ensure that the Palestinian men, women, and children are in fact given peace, and they can live like anybody else anywhere in the world with some sense of respect and some sense of humanity.
What's in your opinion, the broader long-term, if any at all, implications of this conflict in particular?
So there are several implications. Iran name is being called, so the part of the narrative as well is that it's not Hamas, it's really not Hamas, this is Iran. And this is not Islamic Jihad, this is Iran. This is not Hezbollah in the northern part of Israel, this is Iran. So the narrative is that, or the implications are, it is very possible that other governments and other nations could get involved if the war escalates. Iran has already said that if it continues, we probably will get involved. But the international politics is and the geopolitics is really interesting. Implications are, number one, there'll be financial implications. All right, Israel will get more support, more help because they are the victims. Palestinians will continue to be ill-treated. Implications are it could become a regional war. It already started because United States says that their warship intercepted some missiles allegedly shot from Yemen to go into Israel. If that is in fact so, they are doing a proxy war for Israel. And I don't think some of the other countries may do that. Saudi Arabia wanted to normalize relations with Israel under pressure, so they have said, no, we're not interested in doing that anymore. We're putting that on hold. So Israel will in fact have a backlash as well from Arab countries, Arab nations. There will in fact be an economical backlash, and there will in fact be hatred spewing all over the world on both sides. Israel, the people who support Israel, and you're correct, there have been some support, some protests in support of Israel. There'll be some hatred coming from the other side, and it's not good for the world. It's not good for the world. I've seen documentaries, and it's available online, where children are saying Arabs should be dead. We should kill every single Arab, and this is from the Israeli side. And imagine children are growing up with this, and children from the Palestinian side are seeing nothing else but killing and mayhem and bombing every single day. Can you imagine the trauma these children will grow up with? So that's one of the long-term implications, the impact and influence on mental health of these children and the generations to come.
Is that, let me just ask you, all that you have suggested, and even the deaths of civilians associated with this conflict, Is that an inevitability of war, or have we just become so desensitized to the situation that we accept that this is an inevitability?
Yeah, Ketan, you're very correct. In one part, we have become desensitized. You know, even Trinidad and Tobago, long time if you hear killing, you're really concerned. Now, somebody killed here, somebody died here, somebody shot here. We have become desensitized as a people. Even with war, Ukraine going on for a long time, we have become desensitized. And just by the way, I'm throwing in before I continue. In Russia, Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia has been condemned by Western powers as an occupier, rightfully so. Israel is an occupier of land that doesn't belong to them. And yet Israel is not condemned. Israel is not condemned. So yes, we have become desensitized, number one. But even with war, there are laws. Even with war, there are rules. I didn't make that. You didn't make that. These rules have been established a long time ago. United Nations and others have established rules of war. And this is why
Therefore,
we get
doesn't, if that's the case, doesn't Israel have every right? Again, condemning and condoning this entire situation, there's nothing to condone. There's nothing to condone as a part of war, right? But in terms of the condemnation, and we understand the side of Israel and Palestinians and all that is happening, even the war crimes in association to turning off water and electricity, hospitals are close to running out of fuel if they haven't run out. But with all that you said, doesn't Israel actually have every right to defend itself then?
You're correct. Israel has a right to defend themselves. So does the Palestinians. So does any country who is facing an occupying force. And I'm saying again, I want to repeat about the fifth time, that history did not start on October 7th when Hamas went into Israel. History started a long time before. So Israel has a right, but there are rules of war. And it's interesting to understand this in context, because what is happening now, we're saying Israel is defending themselves. Israel has done a similar thing in 2009. They did a similar thing in 1982. They did a similar thing we could call year after year after. So this is not new. This is, in fact, the Palestinian people have been seeing this over and over and over again. And this is the prerogative that the world leaders are saying, that Israel has a right to defend themselves. So they're justified in sending warships and sending weaponry and sending everything else. But Palestinians have a right, according to international law, to stop or to act against discrimination and occupation and all of the nice pretty words that the United Nations says. And they have in fact been doing that. And in fact, they have no weaponry or little weaponry. They live like animals. The Israeli military describe them as human animals. And if I describe a people or an individual with those terms, evil, wicked, human animals, terrorists, etc., I am justified in killing them if I do the narrative often enough. And therefore, this is not only about defending oneself. This is about the Palestinians also having human rights against discrimination for 75 years now in their own land, being put out of their own place.
Well, Mr. Ali-Mohammed, I'm ending this conversation by asking you, my final question is actually a question of which I also asked His Excellency Aitai Bardov last week when I interviewed him. And that question is that Professor Victor Friedman, he's of the Jezreel Valley College in Israel, and he's quoted as suggesting this horrid situation is still an opportunity. Is this situation an opportunity for the entire world to come together? Because there's, as I said, the world is split. The world is split, and you've mentioned it as well this morning. But is there a peaceful solution to this? Could there still be peace after all that has happened?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that position. There's always an opportunity whenever things happen. And this is an opportunity for the powers that be to talk, to start talking, to give rights not only to one side, but to give rights and humanity and respect to. So the answer is yes. It is hoped that the leaders that be from the Arab world and wherever they are to negotiate will come together, and they will in fact bring some peace eventually once and for all for the generations to come. this two-state solution seems to be the only plausible thing at this time, because the Israelis not going anywhere out of there because they believe they have a God-given right. So the two-state solution, in fact, might be the only possibility to bring some peace. It may not bring the total peace, but it will bring some dignity, some no discrimination towards the Palestinian people. So absolutely, yes, there is still an opportunity to cease the fire, to stop the war, and to go around the negotiation table. Anthony Blinken, in fact, we understand, has been saying that they're not talking negotiation, they're not talking ceasefire, and there's some other word. But is there an opportunity, Ketan? I absolutely say yes, there is an opportunity, and we hope that that opportunity is in fact utilized and grabbed by the powers that be in order to make a place that is better for not only Palestinians, but for Israelis as well, because we believe in justice for all. Allah tells us in Quran that we have to stand up for justice, not just for one group of people, stand up for justice anywhere in the world, even if it is within our own families.
Mr. Ali-Mohammed, thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning and for sharing all of this with us. It's really, I appreciate your time and for the information and for all that has been said. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me, Ketan. A pleasure.
Do have a good day. Mr. Mirza Ali-Mohammed, President of the Islamic Dawah Movement of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, the world is split, but if it's one thing that all of us can agree on, there's not one side to condemn when it comes to war. I say that no matter what war or the situation is, because we can only hope for peace and peaceful coexistence. Will we ever see that, or will we ever be able to achieve that? I'm not sure, but there is always hope. There is always hope for that. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Ketan Shah. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Wishing you a good weekend ahead, maybe a restful one, maybe a quiet one, a safe one. And until we meet again on Monday morning from 6 a.m. for more AM Prime, do have a good weekend, take care, and keep well. Bye-bye.